Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thanks for joining me today on how to build a token server for Agora applications. Today we're going to be walking through first how to build an Express server using Node.js. Then we're going to implement how to build an Agora token and return that token. And lastly, we're going to test it. So I'll make sure that is everyone ready to go. We'll give the stream maybe another minute or so. Let some other people join in so we don't have anyone miss out. Feel free at any point in time during the live code along or during my streams to drop a message in the chat. If you want to see the screen a little bit bigger, you can collapse the left side panel as well. So as long as you have npm set up on your laptop or desktop computer, however you're coding along, a web browser and a code editor, you're ready to code along. And if not, at the end, I'll include the GitHub link so everyone can check out the code for themselves. And I'll also open this up into questions in between each session. So first we'll set up the Express server. This will be the baseline. It really doesn't have much to do with Agora, but this is the foundation of how we're going to be interacting with the service. So if everyone's ready to go, we'll play the video. Good luck. Let's start by creating a new folder. We'll call it AgoraTokenServer. Then we'll open up a terminal window at that folder. Here we'll do an npm init. We can use all the defaults for now. If you'd like to put your name into the author category, feel free. Also, let's use an MIT license for this. Everything looks good. We'll hit OK, and then we'll do npm install express to add the Express module. And then we'll do an npm install Agora access token, and this will install the Agora access token node module. Okay, from there, let's open up our folder in our favorite code editor. We'll check out the package.json. You can see our main file is an index.js, so let's go and create that index.js file. In the index.js, we're going to create a constant called express and require the express node module. From the Agora access token, we're going to require the RTC token builder and RTC role objects. So let's create two constants for them. And once again, we'll require them from the Agora access token. Next, we'll create our port. So we'll set a constant for port. I like 8080, but you can choose any port number you prefer. Next, we're going to create constants for our app ID and our app certificate. For security reasons, I like to use environment variables for these, but if you don't know how to set up environment variables or you'd like to just use a string, you can just add your app ID and app certificate as strings in these variables. And then we're going to create the app and instantiate the Express object. Next, we'll create a no cache function, and what this will do is it'll add a couple response headers to ensure that the browser invalidates and doesn't cache the token, so we're always serving a fresh token with every request. Since we'll be chaining this function with one more, we're going to add the next method. So we ensure that we call the next method in the chain. Then we're going to create a constant for our generateAccessToken function. For right now, let's just set up a placeholder passing in the request and the response. We'll come back and we'll fill this in a little bit later. Let's finish creating our Express app. So next we're going to set up our get endpoint, saying app.get, then entering the endpoint that we want, along with the functions that will trigger once we hit that endpoint. Last, we're going to add the app.listen, pass our port in, and then within the callback, we'll add a console log just to let you know that we're listening on this port. Now that we've got all Hey everyone, thanks for following along, and hope you were able to create your Express service. The npm commands were npm init, npm install Express, npm install Agora-access. So those should be the 3 npm commands you need. All right, and if anyone has any questions up to this point, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them either now or in the chat or in the next segment of the video, or after the next segment of video. Now we're going to walk through how to build an Agora token. So we're going to take the request query string parameters, break them down into variables, check them, set some defaults in there. Then we're going to build our token and then return it. I'll overlay this again or overview this again as we walk through it in the video. So if everyone's ready, we'll get started with the next part. Basics down for our basic Express web service. Let's start with our generateAccessToken. We'll outline all our steps. So first we'll set the response header. Then we're going to get the channel name, followed by the UID and the role. We also can't forget the expiration time for the token. Then we're going to build the token, and lastly, we're going to return the token. So within our response header, we're going to allow a simple access control, allow origin to all, so we don't get any CORS errors. Then we're going to want to get our channel name. The channel name is pretty important, so we're going to make it a constant. We use the request.query to get the query parameter for the channel name. Now, we're going to need to check if the channel name was properly passed. So let's check if channel name is not defined. We're going to need to throw an error. So let's return response.status 500. And we'll make the JSON say error channel is required. Okay, next let's get the UID. Since the UID is a little more flexible, we can say let UID equal request.query.uid. Now, if the UID is not defined, we don't really care as much. So if it's not defined or it's empty, we're going to give it a value of 0. For the role, let's start off by giving everyone a role of subscriber. And now we'll also want to check and see, did we pass in a query param for role? So let's say request.query.role. And we only really care about one role, and that's publisher. Everyone else can be a subscriber. So if the query parameter is equal to publisher, let's set the role equal to publisher. Next, let's set up our expiration time. So we'll say let expire time equal request.query.expire time. So here again, we're going to want to check if the expire time was not defined or possibly even empty. In both cases, we're going to want to default to 3600, which is about an hour. Otherwise, because our role or our expire time is passed as a string, we're going to want to parse it as an int to make sure that it's passed correctly. We also have one more step. Now that we have this expiration time, we have to calculate the privilege expiration time. So even though we want our tokens to be valid for 1 hour, the privilege expiration time is based on the time since 1970. So to do the calculation, we're going to need to get the current time, and then we're going to add it to our expire time. And this is going to give us our privilege expire time. Next, we're going to build our token. So we're going to say constant token equals RTC builder dot build token with UID. And then we're going to pass in the app ID, the app certificate, the channel name, the UID, the role, and the privilege expiration time. Give that a minute so you can see, make sure we're passing in all the correct information. Next, we're going to return our token. So we're going to say response.json. We're going to give our response a key of token, and then for the value, we'll pass the value of the token. Oh, sorry about that. Thanks for following along, everyone. Can you hear me now? Awesome. So, Stefano, William, sorry to see that you're running into issues. I've posted a link to the Agora community Slack channel, so please join us there, and we'd be happy to help you resolve whatever issues you're having, get you started, get you working. I've also added a link to the GitHub repo. It's just down here. So if you can code along now, but you still want to check it out later, the code is there. Now we're getting ready to go into our last part, and we're going to test the token server in a web browser. So really simple, just call the URL, localhost 8080, access token, and then we're going to pass in our query parameters, which are question mark, the variable name, equals the value. And we'll do that first for channel, then for role, then for user ID, and expiration time. So we'll kind of step through all of them and make sure that all the different possibilities of routes are working. And then from there, you should have a fully functional, very simple Agora web service that generates a token, or web service that generates an Agora token. So with that, we're going to start the third segment. And feel free again to keep posting your questions in the chat. I'll update the description and post in the chat. See you in a little bit. Now we're ready to test our service. Let's open up our package.json and add a start script. So we're going to add a comma, add the keyword start, and then say node index.js. Then we're going to click over to our terminal window and say npm start. Now you should see we're listening on port 8080, so it looks like everything started well. Let's open up our favorite web browser. I'll use Safari for simplicity's sake. Let's first check our localhost 8080/access token. Good, we see the proper error message for channel is required. Now let's add our channel name. We see a token, great. Now let's check with if we add in a user role. Great, still working. Let's add in a UID, awesome. And let's check with our expire time. Looks like everything's working. Or Slack and join the channel for Web Help Me or any other platforms you might be working with, and our team would be happy to help you and get you started using Agora. So again, thanks so much for joining along. We're really excited to have everyone here coding along with us. Again, the GitHub repo is in the description, so feel free to grab the code and run with it. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to reach out in the chat or on Slack, or you can email me, hermes@agora.io, or you can reach out on Twitter at Hermes_F, and I'd be happy to help you along with your Agora journey. Cheers, and have a great day. Hey, Ed. Hey, everyone. Whoever's still around. I realized I might have jumped out a little bit early. So I'm going to stick around for another 10, 15 minutes or so and help answer people's questions. So, Ed, to answer your question, this URL, sorry, apologies, I arrived late, is this token service for accessing content, as in a tokenized URL for using content playback. The token is used for validating privilege on the Agora network. So if you don't have token authorization enabled, anyone that has access to the app ID and the channel name can join your channel. And that would obviously be very insecure if this information leaked out. So what you have is your app ID that's installed on the local client and can be found visibly in logs and stuff like that if you really kind of parse through it. But on the server side, you have an app certificate. And the app certificate is like your app secret. And this is what you don't want to be sharing with anyone or posting publicly anywhere. And on the server side, you also have your app ID. So when you make a request from your client to the server knows your app ID, your app certificate, the role of the user, whether it be a subscriber or publisher. It knows, based on the request, the user ID, the channel name. So it takes all that information and hashes it into this unique string. And then you'll pass that in along with the channel name when you join a channel. And that gets sent along to the Agora server. It gets decrypted. The Agora server says, okay, this is this user, they have these privileges, it allows them to join. If they have an expired token, they can't join. So that's the very basics of what the Agora applications need from a tokens server. I do plan to publish the full tutorial without these interruptions so that you can code along, pause. We will be posting that as well. So please keep a lookout, join the Slack channel, and we'll definitely share the URLs there. And most likely it'll be shared in an email as well. So if you're on the Agora mailing list, you'll get it. If not, feel free to reach out to me and I'll make sure you get added to that. You can find my contact details in the description, my email, and my Twitter. Cool. So build with UID is when you would have an integer UID. Build with account uses string IDs. To be honest with you, build ID, if you look at it, build with UID, if you peek into the definition, it uses build with account because it's all web. It just generates strings, and JavaScript you can mutate through those. So there's not like a huge difference, but if you're using services like cloud recording, they don't have good support for string IDs. So generally, we recommend using integer user IDs instead of strings. But in terms of token serialization, because it's passed between as JSON, it doesn't really matter there. I'm not 100% sure on the exact timeline of that, but I know there are efforts to bring these into alignment. And if you want to shoot me an email, I can definitely dig more into that and get you a little bit more information. John, did I answer your question, or is there still a little bit of confusion? Does every user trying to connect to a channel need their own token, or just a single token for all users is enough? So it really depends on the level of security you want. If you want to have like general, like you don't really care so much as long as they have only authorized clients, like something that you've built has the ability to join the channel, then what you could do is you could build the token using UID 0. And in the example, that's why we defaulted to UID 0. What that allows you to do is you generate one token, and then every client, no matter what their user ID is, will be able to use that. It's not secure for like live broadcast where you'd want to have a separation of audience member and broadcaster. But for something like group chat, where you don't want to have a ton of calls to servers, you can easily generate one token, keep it on your back end, and then have everyone use the same token when they log in. But keep in mind that tokens are only valid for up to 24 hours, and then they'll force you to re-authenticate. Raul, did that answer your question? Awesome. So there is one more thing that you should always remember with tokens, and it's something that I've noticed a lot of people ask in the Slack channel. When you set the expiration time to 0, a lot of people think that defaults to 24 hours, but I've noticed that if you pass an expiration time of 0, the token will expire instantly, because the token builder takes the time since 1970. So basically, you need to get the current time plus the amount of time you want the token to be valid for. And if you pass 0, it's like, oh, it's January 1st, 1970. Of course, this token is expired. Like, it's not a valid time range. So did that make sense? For security purposes, we recommend that tokens are always generated on the server side and retrieved via RESTful request. And that's so that you keep your app certificate, which is the secret that generates these tokens. You want to keep that out of your end user's hands. So you keep it on a server that you control using an HTTPS encrypted request. So always use HTTPS for the encryption, so that way you don't have to worry about are the query parameters visible or not. In HTTPS, they're not. In HTTP, they're easily visible, and so is the contents of a post request. So you'd never want to pass token requests as HTTP, always through secure connections. Daniel, did that answer your question? Awesome. It seems people still have questions, so I'm going to hang out on here as long as people have questions. So feel free to just keep asking away. Yes. So when you generate a token using Agora's like demo abilities, like a demo token that's valid for 24 hours, that's generally generated with a UID of 0 so that every user can use the same token. Otherwise, you'd have to sit there and manually do that for each user every time you wanted to test it. It'd be a little painful. But using this little microservice, you could run it locally and it'd be very easy to test out. Did that answer your question? Awesome. No, the same token cannot be used for both video and RTM. Video would have its own token, RTM would have its own token. In the Agora Access Token library module that you downloaded as part of the video, there's RTC token builder and RTM token builder. And for those, they follow generally the same structure. You'd pass an app ID, app certificate, role. You wouldn't pass a channel name because RTM is more just for joining into the network, and then you can easily join hundreds of channels, so it wouldn't make sense to have like a token for every channel. So RTM, in the place of the channel name, it takes the UID and the privilege expiry time as well. And then the UID field is left empty when you build the RTM token. I think the RTM token builder abstracts that for you, so just follow which parameters that takes, and it'll set it up and output a token in a very similar manner. So with that being said, you could generate both tokens at the same time. So you could have a single microservice where you say, okay, here's the user ID, the privilege stuff, expiry time, and the channel. The channel will be used for the video. Everything else will be used for the RTM. And then you could have your video token and your RTM token in the same response. Did that answer your question? Awesome. Okay, so the question is, I use numerical UID, and when the user starts sharing the screen, I create an additional client. But this client requires a different UID. Right now, I do something like max uint minus UID. Is there a better way? Um, one of the ways that I've recommended that you could do it would be to append an integer at the end of the UID. So if your UID is 1, 2, 3, 4, integer 0 could mean camera, integer 1 could mean screen. And then whenever you get that UID through, you would just parse off that end integer. That'd just be another recommendation, but it's really up to you on how you want to differentiate and associate those UIDs. That makes sense, Slava? Oh, and if you're screen sharing, make sure that the screen sharing client, if you're using a separate client, has their own token as well, based on their UID. Flags would also be another way. The one thing you have to be cognizant of is when you're decoding on the remote side, like, how do you know which user ID is a screen or which user ID is a camera? If you use like an end integer, you can always parse that end integer every stream and know which one it is. Whereas if you have like max uint minus UID, you'd have some crazy number. I guess that'd be the other way you'd see it. Whereas your camera would be a generally small integer number, and then max int minus UID. So both work. It's really about making sure that you can create that association on the client side to use it to your advantage. That make sense? Or did I confuse people more? There is a flag that is sent that says is screen or is video, but to be honest, I've noticed that not every browser honors it. Yeah, it only works on the local. So I would say the best way is either through RTM, where you would have everyone join a channel named for whatever your video stream would be, that you could send the data signals and say, hey, this UID that's coming through is a screen, and parse it that way. A signaling layer is always going to be your most efficient way, so you always know what's going on. Versus if you're just parsing bits, it works. You're just kind of mixing a bunch of things in together, I guess. Okay. Understandably, this is outside of the token server discussion, but just to be helpful and maybe clear things up. When I say signal, this is generally referring to Agora's RTM SDK, which is just data messaging. You have an object that gets passed along, and one of those keys is the message itself. And in that message, you can customize the data. I like to send JSON objects through because it's easy to serialize and deserialize in most languages. So that's what we mean by signaling. In some of the native SDKs, you can find a way to open up a data channel. We really don't recommend doing this because it's not stable. So there's no guarantee on delivery. Let's say you push data through this data channel. It might get there. It might get dropped because it gets encoded with a frame that doesn't make it, and the frame gets rebroadcast, but the data doesn't. Does that make sense? So we always recommend that if you want to have any sort of signaling layer, you use Agora's RTM, real-time messaging SDK, and that's available for native and web. that answer your question? Awesome. So just out of my own curiosity, is everyone a JavaScript programmer, or there are other back-end languages that you'd like to see me do a similar live stream for? Like maybe Golang or PHP or Python or something like that for token servers specifically. Samyak. All right, I'll do a Golang one. PHP, man of my heart. C#, PHP, Golang. Okay, so actually, let me put this as a poll, and we'll take it back. So, what other language? Check the chat. Cool. So here's the poll. Feel free to ask away or select away, and we'll take that into consideration for the next stream. And we're working on getting better code snippets into the documentation to show how to do this in all languages. So we have examples in C++, Java, PHP, Ruby. We have efforts that myself and a couple of the team members are working on. Rick with the funny JS note is missing. It's for the next one, Rick. Which one should we do next? But yeah, we're adding into the documentation better code snippets to do something similar as this webinar. And if you have any more feedback on our documentation and what you think we should add, definitely join the Slack channel. The link is below. Join one of the channels for your appropriate language and post. Let us know what you're struggling with and how we can help, because we want everyone to be able to succeed with Agora. Yeah, with PHP, it's a lot simpler of a single lamp stack call, right? That's great to hear, John. Thanks so much for being an Agora developer, and thank you for everyone for being Agora developers and joining us today. Is there any more questions, or do you think it's a good time to maybe call it a day, and we'll continue the conversation on Slack, or if you want to reach out on Twitter? My GitHub is down there, so feel free to open any issues on GitHub as well. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.